I love this country. I really do. I love this country. I love my home. I love Kansas. I love everything about where I'm from. I'm a fifth-generation farm kid. Both parents' families. Farmers, 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 farmers. I became a first-generation college student. And thanks to incredible public school teachers and a loving family, I got to live my American dream. My American dream was to become a physician. So here I am, a fifth-generation farm kid, first-generation college student, goes to medical school, some military service, come back to rural America, to a little city called Great Bend, Kansas. That's on the Great Bend of the Arkansas River. It's spelled just like Arkansas, but it's pronounced Arkansas River in Kansas. Middle of 60,000 people, the only OBGYN. I delivered a baby most every day for 25 years, was on call every day, every other day for 25 years. We brought laparoscopes and lasers and infertility treatments to rural America. People traveled 3 to 4 hours to see me, to take care of, and it was the honor of my life. Woke up in 2014, and for whatever reason, people were asking me to run for Congress, and my wife would look at them and say, hell no, he's not interested. And then she would say, and by the way, I don't want you to start any new companies. I want you to tell every board you're on that you're giving your notice, and I want you to stay home and raise these boys of yours. And by this point, we had a daughter, and we've been married 40 years now. We celebrated our 40th anniversary last year. And by this time, we had a girl who just finished college, a son finishing his MBA, and one in high school and one in college. And we had 2 kids when we were so poor we shouldn't have had them, and in medical school, and I tricked her into 2 more later. But anyway, she said, you need to finish these 2 boys. You got a sophomore and a senior in high school. You need to stick around here. Well, another year passed, and we had our first grandson. And she looks at me, and we have one of those discussions that you don't have often, but you know, what's next in life? And she looks at me, and she says, this is the worst economy of our lifetime. Our White House, the President of the White House doesn't respect law and order. He's on an apology tour. They're going to bankrupt us. Your grandson was born with $40,000 in national debt. What are you going to do about it? And she said, he'd like to fix things. Washington, D.C. is really broke, so it's time for you to go. We ran for Congress, upset a sitting incumbent by 14, 15 points. When our senior senator retired in 2020, we ran for the Senate, and here we are. You know, I came to the House, I think, very simple goals. I wanted to balance the federal budget. I wanted to fix health care. I wanted a strong military. I wanted to roll back regulations. And maybe I'll share a little bit about my experience with regulations in the private sector, some of the businesses I started. But what I found is the resistance here was fierce. The resistance was fierce, and not just from the Democrat Party, but from my own party. You know, look, I'm not a political science major. I'm a biochemistry, nuclear engineering major, and didn't study political science. The last history class I had was junior in high school, and government class senior in high school as well. So I came here really without a label. Didn't know. People will say, well, what type of Republican are you? And I said, well, I'm a person that believes in my values. My values are what's important to me. So I had to develop and started to share. When you get in front of an audience, you got 30 seconds to say, well, what's important to Roger Marshall? And I say, well, this is what's important to me. Faith, family, community, education, and hard work. My dad taught me to wear my religion on my heart, not my shirt sleeve. I believe a family loves you no matter what, that the family is the one that should be taking care of my grandparents and my sick father-in-law and my sick children or grandchildren. I think the family should be lifting each other up when you're down. Community. I would share community, and I did just fine as a congressman representing rural America, but all of a sudden I'm running for the Senate, and people in the big cities, what do you mean by community? I said, well, what do you mean? You don't understand why community is important. I said, let me explain it to you this way. Once a year, I go to see the Kansas City Chiefs play. One of my best friends have season tickets, and he would invite me to a game. And about my 4th or 5th year in Great Bend, he asked me to go, and I said, well, I need to check and see, are the Great Bend Panthers home that weekend? He said, what? I delivered these kids. I delivered their brothers and their sisters, and they're playing football for Great Bend High. I need to be there for them. And it was at that time I realized that my community was more important than my infatuation with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I believe a community solves problems, not Washington, D.C. So faith, family, community, education. Education's the great equalizer. Everything I have professionally, I would owe it to my education. And just so proud that I was a product of public education. My kids were a product of public education. I got to nominate and write the nomination for all 4 of my kids had the same first grade teacher, write that nomination for her to be accepted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame. That's what small town America is like. So I get here to D.C. and I don't really have a label. So it's always the funnest thing about getting asked to speak at something like this is to figure out, well, what is national conservatism? And boy, it fits pretty good with who I am. I believe in national independence and sovereignty. I believe in law and order. I mentioned my dad. My dad was the chief of police for 25 years. My dad had the ability to take something really complicated and make it simple. He believed there was right and wrong. There was day and night. He believed in equal application of the law. You want to upset my dad, you call him at midnight on a Friday night, and you're a wealthy person in town, and tell him, hey, your officers arrested my son. He's in jail, and I want him out right now. You want to really get my dad's dander up. That was the ticket right there. He preached this message of applying the law equally. But I think about where we are today. The Democrat Party is the party of projection. In fact, I think they have a borderline personality disorder. So that's the physician in me coming out, that you meet thousands of patients, and the patients that are projecting onto others typically had this underlying borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality folks love people to hate them. They really struggle with relationships. They're very impulsive. But the Democrat Party is this projection. Their whole theme right now is that President Trump is a threat to democracy, but they're the threat to democracy. They don't believe in law and orders. They're the party of open borders, cashless bail, defund the police. They support riots, the rioters. They support the smash and grab. The next thought, as I understand what national conservatism means, is a rejection of imperialism and globalism. When the Marshall family gathers to watch the Olympics here in a couple weeks, we're going to root for the Americans. Is there something wrong with that? And I expect the French to root for the French and the Russians to root for the Russians, but I'm rooting for the Americans, all right? That's what we root for the home team, and we play the game and we shake your hands, and now some of those same schools that my boys just beat the heck out of for about 20 years on and off are now those parents that we crushed all the time. They're now my best friends, right? So we shake hands, and we've got to know each other here. I'm an American first, and I'm unapologetic about that. We should all be Americans first. When I try to understand what the World Health Organization has become, what the UN has become, what NATO has become, I'm ashamed. All these folks get outside of their lane, what they're supposed to be doing. If the World Health Organization would just focus, and we've done mission trips all around the world, medical mission trips, and I learned right away. I went with suitcases full of antibiotics and anti-worm medicine, and when we got to these places like Haiti, and there would be 90 people standing in line at 8 o'clock in the morning, and not to be gross people out, they would show me the worms that were in their feces, or they would show me they would open their mouth, and I would get to look, and based upon what I would see, I would prescribe that. And I learned right away there's not enough antibiotics, anti-worm medicine out there, that my gosh, they don't even have plumbing, that they don't dispose of their sewage properly. So if the World Health Organization would just focus on simple things like clean water and sewage, it would have a huge impact on the world. By the way, the number one predictor of carbon footprint for the world is a strong world economy. If we have a strong world economy, then we can build the infrastructure to get natural gas, cheap, clean natural gas into those communities and decrease their carbon footprint. I think as we talk about those national organizations, I think it's a good time to talk about national security from a standpoint of national conservatism. The greatest threat to our national security is our national debt, okay? Make no mistakes about it that we're going to spend $1 trillion on interest this year. We're going to take in $6 trillion and spend $8 trillion. Maybe it's 5 and 7, whatever. We're going to spend $2 trillion more than what we take in this year. And when we sit there and try to figure out how much food stamps we should have or how many new submarines we should build, and we're spending $1 trillion on interest, there's just no money left to do anything. So the long-term greatest threat to our national security is our national debt. The most immediate threat is our open southern border. Beyond that, I think you look at different nationalities, but people are certainly concerned about China, as am I. But I'm much more concerned, rather than how many naval ships they have, I'm much more concerned about biosecurity. That COVID was absolutely made in a laboratory in Wuhan, China, and accidentally released. I believe that. It was funded with American dollars. If you got 30 minutes or 3 hours, I'll present my case, why I believe there is a preponderance of evidence to suggest that. But I'm concerned about bioterrorism. I'm concerned about cyber attacks. I'm concerned that China makes 90% of the counterfeits that come into this country. I'm concerned about the $500 billion of intellectual property that they steal from us. The disrespect I see from other nations when it comes to intellectual property and personal property was a huge awakening for me as a young congressman. Thoughts about the national government. Look, we need a strong but a limited state is essential. The federal government should ensure our safety, interstate commerce, international trade, currency, those basic things. We need to stay in our lane. We need to shrink government. We need to freeze hiring. I've seen hospitals taken over that were upside down. The first thing you do is you go in and you freeze hiring, you cut expenses here, and you try to grow your business. By the way, extending the tax cuts, the Donald Trump tax cuts, is exactly what will grow our business. It'll grow the economy just like it did before. I want to speak for a moment about God and public religion. Look, I told you earlier, my dad just said to wear my religion on my heart, and I still absolutely believe that, but I still think that we are still one nation under God. We are still one nation under God. By the way, it was President Eisenhower that put that into our pledge. You know, my prayer each morning, and I do get up each morning, and I have quiet time since I've been 10 years old. I've read the scripture every day, pray every morning, every evening. My prayer, first of all, is that I'd be a message of hope, that you all would leave somewhere today this little message of hope that I'm giving you. But beyond that, my prayer is that I would do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. The walk humbly is so important up here. And that's why I think we need God at the Capitol. That if you acknowledge that God is sovereign Lord, it humbles ourselves. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity said the greatest sin is pride, which is the opposite of humbling yourself, right? So I think that up here you're surrounded by people that are saying you're smart, and these folks that are at NATO today preaching a message, they're just full of it. They're full of themselves. Really, President Trump could come back when he's reelected. He'll put an end to this never-ending war in Ukraine, the war we should have never been in, right? So I think there is a place for God in religion. I certainly, though, the freedom of religion was what this nation was founding on. It was the defining reason our founding fathers left the countries, is that you should be able to worship where you want to worship. But make no mistake about it, this country was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Certainly I believe in free enterprise, in rewarding innovation, protecting innovation. I'll share two quick experiences that I had. One was took a group of doctors, we formed a hospital. I got to implement the ACA. At the same time, I'd been part of a small community bank that was growing, became the vice chairman of the board. And when Dodd-Frank was hit, the board asked me to help implement the Dodd-Frank rule. So at the same time I was implementing the ACA, I was implementing the Dodd-Frank stuff, and certainly understood what it means, how overregulation creates uncertainty and overregulation creates consolidations of industry. I mentioned before that I was a biochemistry major and not a political student, so I loved going back, and I wrote all that speech I just gave. Then I went back and read Edmund Burke for the first time, who he was and what he meant, his respect for tradition. You know, the fifth commandment is honor your father and mother, but the Sunday school lesson I always taught is that the fifth commandment is the only one with a promise. It says honor your father and mother, and the promise is so that all may go well with you. That's the respect for tradition that I'm talking about. He believed in gradual change. I believe that's what the Senate is. That's what the filibuster is for. The House is the tea and the teacup, and we're the saucer. We're supposed to catch it, and we're the ones kind of putting the brakes. I love that about us. Skepticism of abstract ideals was an Edmund Burke theme. The Green New Deal is the biggest abstract ideal I've ever seen in my life. And I'm a huge environmentalist. I want to leave this world cleaner, healthier, and safer than I found it. But when we talk about energy, affordable and reliable are also important. And we're going in the right direction. Farmers and ranchers were the original environmentalists, and that was something I was taught, again, honoring my father, my grandparents, building terraces, soil conservation. We planted over 20,000 trees on our property. I've done lots of conservation projects as well. But you all, I think, understand the Edmund Burke and what he stood for, and it's interesting how it fits my life in many, many ways. I want to leave you with this. I'm going to ask you, are you a patriot? When did you become a patriot? Folks, we're today's modern-day patriots. I want to share when I became a patriot. I was in my second year of medical school. My wife and I got married 2 weeks before medical school. A year and a half later, we had our first baby. And we wanted to have the baby, but we didn't have 2 nickels. I put myself through school, putting myself through medical school, and brought my little girl home to a little studio apartment. We took my desk, and we made that into a crib. And my wife said she didn't want to go back to work, that she wanted to stay home and raise this child. And I said, well, that absolutely. My mom, both of our moms, our grandmas, all of them, of course, that was their first job. The most important job in America is raising those children. And I had one of those discussions with myself. I said, this is no way for a father to take care of his family. You're going to have to do something to make ends meet here. And I said, you know, my brother had served in the military, my father. Actually, since the Civil War, someone from every generation of my family served the military. Had four of my grandparents fought for the Union. 3 of them made the ultimate sacrifice. My mom and uncle in World War I in the Argonne Forest. 2 of my dad's uncles stormed Normandy Beach. My wife lost an uncle in World War II. Like I said, my father served, my brother served. And by the way, my son is serving now. I got promoted to sergeant 2 weeks ago. He's in Poland. Part of a never-ending war. And I said to myself, it's you know, the one thing I hadn't got to do yet was serve. So we signed up in the Army Reserve. That summer, we went to Fort Belvoir for our officers' training, and I was leaving town, and my wife was crying, and I said, oh, what the heck, just hop in, and you're going to go to officers' training with us. So we spent the summer at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and that summer, whenever we had a moment, we would go to Monticello, spend a day at Monticello, spend a day at Mount Vernon, spend a day at the American History Museum, spend a day at the Aerospace Museum. And somewhere in that summer, I'm going through officers' training, certainly understanding what it means to be a leader and an officer in the military. to take this oath to defend the Constitution. But somewhere in that summer, it all came together for me, realizing what our founding fathers had done, that they had given everything. They didn't just sign up for the military. They'd given up money, and they were taking clothes to clothe the troops with. And somehow that finally all sunk home, and that's when that summer I became a patriot for the first time, knowing that I have a job to do today. So I'll leave that with you. You're here today. You're a modern-day patriot. We all have the challenge before us. The enemy is alive and well. There is a battle for the soul of this nation. It is a spiritual battle. I'm very honored to represent the people of Kansas and up here defending our Constitution. We're defending our constitutional rights, defending our sovereignty. I love this country. Thank you.